Hello, everybody. It's Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. Andy is here with me this evening, so you all probably have an idea of what we're doing tonight. But first of all, I have to give my usual greeting. Andy, it is good to see you. Hope you're doing well today.
Hi, Steve. Happy to be here. Always am.
Right. So, back to Ultimate Journey. On the road to Blackest Night. The second story arc begins today. And we're going to be going over a very interesting piece of this story simply because of the fact that we get the introduction to the brainchild of the Blackest Night storyline, as well as the large chunk of the Road to Blackest Night. And that, of course, is the 5-part issue miniseries from 1999, Day of Judgment, written by Geoff Johns and artwork by Matt Smith. You wouldn't really think about this specific story when it comes to Blackest Night, but there is a crucial turning point in Hal's path, because once again, it's kind of funny how these little events turn out to, at the end of the day, become Green Lantern stories. So this was a story that I really am glad that I went back to, because I didn't really remember it much. I knew what the outcome was, and I knew where it fit in the Road to Blackest Night, but I don't remember my actual thoughts towards this book. And after rereading it, I had fun. This was a really enjoyable ride. And before I get into your thoughts, Andy, I had an interesting revelation right before we got together tonight.
Mhm.
What I find very interesting about this specific story, it sort of is like the complete opposite of Final Night. This time, we don't really have the best artwork. The artwork by Matt Smith is much to be desired. But the story from Geoff Johns is just such a roller coaster ride of entertainment and fun. I
Yeah.
had such a blast reading this story.
Yeah, I did too. And I get what you mean. The art is serviceable here. But it's almost a departure for what we say. A lot of the stuff we read on this channel and talk about, you and I will usually gush for a good 10 to 15 minutes on the art specifically. That's not really the case here, and that's okay because there's a lot of comics that are written where the art is serviceable and it's not kind of like the entire thing that brings us to the story. Um, but what a cool story. Just to give you like a bird's eye view into to my thinking. So I hadn't read this one before. And this was I was trying to think like I have not really read much of anything that I can think of that has to do with like so much of the DC universe, like supernatural, like
The
war of
magic
heaven and
side.
hell type stuff, the magic side. So this was really cool to kind of dive into that, because our focus on Green Lantern, we've been seeing much more of kind of this cosmic scope of DC, right? Which is also super cool.
Yeah.
But who'd have thought that while doing this journey that focuses on a really cosmic power, we'd get to this really magic power that we would be talking about too. So super cool for that reason. Everything else aside, this was like a really neat kind of homework assignment for me to dive a little deeper into that side of the DC canon. But as you alluded to, at the end of the day, Geoff Johns found a way to make this a little bit of a Green Lantern story for us. And since we know
Exactly.
where we're going, what this journey is, of course, Green Lantern's going to be involved somehow.
Well,
But
yes.
1,000 foot view, that's just something I wanted to say about this one.
Yes. And I'm glad that some of the things you said were actually some of the things that I wanted to make sure that we discussed on the video. When we get back to the artwork, you said that it's serviceable. And when I watch a lot of videos in the comic book community, when they say that the one thing that keeps me on this story is the fact that the artwork is very good, it's a nice compliment to the artist, but for me personally, I don't want the art to be the driving force of my story. I mean, like, look, I will praise people like Alex Ross or Todd McFarlane or Stuart Imogen, to name a few. But at the same time, I want a really good story that I can chew on. I mean, Alex Ross is a top-notch artist, but when you read a story like Mark Waid's Kingdom Come or Kurt Busiek's Marvels, the artwork is a great marriage to that great story. And that's what you want the art to be. You don't want the art to be the saving grace of the story.
Mhm.
And again, Geoff Johns, we haven't really talked much about Geoff Johns and his work, but
No,
we never did a
no,
creator's note, even though it was something I think you and I have talked about off camera many, many times.
yeah,
But we're going to talk a lot about Geoff Johns during this journey because he is the brainchild behind where we all end up. So when you see Geoff Johns coming into this world, the fact that the magic universe is brought into the story at the very same time, this is also when he starts joining David Goyer on the newly created JSA run over at DC, which many people say is Geoff Johns' greatest work in DC Comics outside of Blackest Night. And what I definitely notice in this is the fact that we get not just the magic universe, we also get a very important role for the Golden Age superheroes of the JSA. We see Alan Scott, we see Jay Garrick. We also get a really great moment featuring the JSA, which we'll get into a little bit later. But the fact that Geoff Johns harps on these creations, as well as the main antagonist, which is the possessed Spectre, which is another character that we hadn't really seen much of
mhm.
in DC Comics at the time. It's also just nice to see that he shows his love. You can tell in the writing of this story how deep he likes to dig to find these characters that time forgot and not just bring them into the story, but bring such a prominent role and a devotion and, just like I said, pure, unadulterated love
Mhm.
for these characters. That's why people praise Geoff Johns. He loves to write these DC characters.
Yeah. I mean, like you see it like in the revitalization of the JSA, like as the quintessential example, but what he loves to do is take characters that he loves, and it's not just modernizing them, it's breathing a life into how they're presented to show what makes those characters worthy of love to a new audience. And it's great to see in this story, which is kind of our intro to Geoff Johns as part of the Blackest Night journey, to see him doing it right here from the very beginning. Because those core issues of Blackest Night, which we won't talk about at all today, but we will eventually get to, will be doing that, and that's something that Geoff Johns consistently does in my favorite works from him. But this is a much younger Geoff Johns right now writing this, and it's wonderful to see from the jump. It's like, yes, I understand why this guy was able to do a story that culminates so much of what came before, given the care and attention he pays to the past of where comics came from.
Absolutely. And he does that by showing the love to the characters. He also shows the love to the creator. I mean, I'm pretty certain. I wish that there were interviews, but I would not be surprised if one of his true idols is Gardner Fox because of
Mhm.
how much he loves characters like Jay Garrick and Hawkman and Hawkgirl, but also bringing characters like the Spectre and Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, in this at this point in time, he actually is under a completely different name, which I'm still never going to get used to. But it's also really funny to know that, when you think about the history of DC, the first characters in the Golden Age that we got introduced to were the Holy Trinity. But you don't think about the fact that Jerry Siegel is one of the co-creators of the Spectre. The fact that Bill Finger is a co-creator of Alan Scott, the Green Lantern from All American Comics. So again, it's also a little bit of a history lesson. And
Mhm.
I'm just loving the fact that Geoff Johns got on board because he saw what was already getting done with stories like 0 Hour Crisis in Time, seeing that big role that the JSA played, seeing the smaller but still significant role they played in Final Night. So this time he really wants to bring these characters into the forefront, and also getting the opportunity to see the Magic universe, because these are characters that we don't really see in books because not all of them are strong enough to really carry their own titles.
Mm.
But when you see the characters like Dr. Fate, another Gardner Fox creation, and Dr. Occult and the Phantom Stranger and Zatanna, of course, like it's just so cool to see these characters and getting these readers introduced to them, saying, hey, these are characters that have been in the DC world for years. We'd like you to meet them, and we'd like you to see them drive a story like this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, it's very cool. And that's why from the jump, one of the first things I wanted to say was seeing that Magic universe a little bit closer was very interesting for me and a really fun time. So I don't know. Do you want to
Yeah,
get into the book?
absolutely. So where does it start? It actually starts in hell, and it starts
As all
with
good stories do.
and we are introduced to the character of Asmodel, who is a fallen angel. And another character that had been in DC in a while comes to visit him, and it's the demon, Etrigan, who is a character that I also know Bruce Timm has such a passion for because he's featured him in a lot of DC animation in great ways.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of tells Asmodel, and there's also
Neron, I think.
Neron.
Yeah.
Neron is also another character that they basically find out through Etrigan that Jim Corrigan, the person who took on the responsibility of the Spectre for many, many years, is now officially dead. And the Spectre now has no soul, technically. So they said, let's call the Spirit of Vengeance down, and let's give Asmodel what he really wants. And that is the ability to rage war on the place that banished him, heaven. So Asmodel possesses the Spectre, and the Spectre not only goes to try and head for heaven, but he sort of brings hell with him to Earth, as well as giving true definition and spectacle to the famed line, hell freezing over. So the heroes obviously need to get the call on the magic world, and the JSA and the JLA are all here. And Kyle Rayner, of course, still trying to discover himself, has a little bout with the Enchantress, which I think is probably one of the most funnest parts of the entire book. That's like a laugh a minute riot between those two. But long and the short of it, they find out what happened to the Spirit of Vengeance, and they need to do a couple of things. They need to go to heaven to see if Jim Corrigan will take the Spirit of Vengeance as his own again. They got to go down to hell to try and figure out what's going on there to bring it back to normal. And then a bunch of them have to go and find the Spear of Destiny, led by another hero who we haven't mentioned, but we're so glad he's here, Shazam. At the time, being allowed to be called Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
So it's already fun right off the cuff.
Yeah, we've set up a kind of classic adventure story. You've got your groups of heroes with different defined tasks, which is just kind of fun to see play out. The correction to how do we get hell to stop freezing over, and this mythical weapon to see what we can do with it. So just a solid starting point. And again, what I'll say about this one is for most of this book, I don't know how much there is to say, like, to really dig your teeth into and talk about, but it remains fun throughout. And that's why I say, like, that's a great setup. It's a classic adventure setup. Mash
Exactly.
up really great characters, send them on defined missions that are related to each other, raise the stakes, have them wonder how others are doing, and have it make sense of the mystery before us that we only know a little bit of from the beginning of it. So it's I don't want to use the word serviceable again here because I used it for the art in the sense of I could take it or leave it, but it was what I needed for the story. But this is a classic adventure tale. And
Exactly.
there's a place for that.
Now, again, this is Geoff Johns diving into the history, and he says, I want to give a modern audience a classic golden age feel superhero story. Like
Mhm.
you do get elements like the Green Lantern who are definitely part of the cosmic universe, but we really don't see Kyle really diving into the cosmic world until a certain point in this book, which we'll get to in just a bit.
Mhm.
But like I said, it feels like a traditional classic comic book story. And again, I think that that's the true appeal of this work and Geoff Johns's ability to write the characters. Because I remember when I was trying to get you to start reading the JSA books.
Mhm.
And I remember you getting in contact with me after you read like the first story arcs. And I don't know what your direct words were, but I swear I think you might have said, I am in love.
Mhm.
Because again, the JSA books also, they feel like truly classic golden age stories. And Geoff Johns just knows how to bring that feeling into his
Mhm.
work. And that's why he's so praiseworthy.
That feels like what I probably would have said because it was true of my of my experience reading JSA. But you're right, it does kind of feel like a love letter to Golden Age comics, which it's funny. There's so much of what Geoff Johns writes that feels that way. And then there's also so much of what Geoff Johns writes that feels completely antithetical to the Golden Age and some of the most modern and most like innovative
Right.
storytelling. And it's really it's interesting to see both ends of the spectrum in the way that he writes and the stories he chooses to tell because it shows you the intent behind everything he writes. That if you're getting that kind of golden age classic adventure comic book story feel from something, that is what he wants to do. That's how he wants you to feel. And it does not mean that that's his skill set and that's all he can deliver on. And we'll see that as we continue on through this journey. We got some very different stories to read coming up, but I
Yeah,
want we'll focus
absolutely.
here. We'll focus
Absolutely.
here.
So we get some very interesting revelations as we go through the story. Also, another character was a character that was very present at this time, particularly because of the JLA run, and that was Zoriel, which is also an
Mhm.
angel. And he is a character that I really don't have too much to say about. I don't really look at him as a character that I like. He's a character that looks down upon the heroes because he feels that they're not of his ilk, because it's like, oh yeah, they may have these powers, but I'm an angel, like I am supernatural omnipotency. So he's a character that I really couldn't get behind, but thank goodness there were so many characters in this book that you could get behind.
Mhm. Mhm.
So when they get to heaven, they meet Jim, and Jim basically it's the only part of heaven in the book that we ever actually see, and we never see heaven again. Basically he said, sorry guys, I'm retired, go find somebody else, heaven's done. Like that was a waste of
That was
time.
it.
Honestly, when heaven basically slammed the door in their face, I sort of laughed a little bit, and I
Mhm.
was like, wow, Zoriel, you think you're so omnipotent now, do you? I think it was sort of a way to make him feel like complete crap, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, definitely, definitely. No, but you're right, and it's an interesting storytelling beat to kind of present us with DC Heaven, and then and like that's not the story we're telling today.
Yeah, exactly. But the story of Hell is definitely a different story because Hell literally has frozen over.
Mhm.
The fight with the Cerebus was definitely entertaining. I definitely enjoyed that. But then they actually end up going to Purgatory, and
Mhm.
they end up seeing oh, completely forgot to mention the only part about heaven that was wonderful was seeing the members of the JSA who died during
Mhm.
Zero Hour Crisis in Time. So sorry I forgot to mention it, but oh man, was it wonderful to see the JSA team get reunited for a little bit.
Definitely, but I know where your head is at because Purgatory is a little bit more what draws your attention when you look back on it, particularly because of why we are reading this particular
Yeah.
book. But this gives us this gives us a soul to look at who might be looking for a power of redemption,
Yeah,
if you will.
because when they come to Purgatory and they see heroes and villains that are long gone, like you see Vigilante, you see the Peacemaker in there for like a quick second, and they see the heroes, and they obviously know the heroes are here for something important, and each and every one of them wants to be the person to sacrifice themselves for this cause. And then out of nowhere, a small voice says, please let me do it. I think I need to do this. And they turn around and it's Hal. Hal's in Purgatory. And it makes so much sense for him to be there because one of the discussions that is had after Hal is actually seen and him requesting, practically at this time, pleading to be the person to help with this cause is because, yes, he had recently done some very bad things, but there was so much good that he did before he had his emotional breakdown.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it just, I mean, the entire concept of it gives me chills. We've gone into these wonderful stories in the DC journey, which really drill into the heart and emotion of what makes the Green Lantern a great character, what makes Hal Jordan a great character. Not that he's the only Green Lantern we're talking about, but he's kind of core to everything we're doing in this journey. And just that shot, that shot at something that resembles redemption, and that idea that of all these people who are here, who has ended up in purgatory, who are we going to see that we didn't just meet and get our little reunion with in the heaven scene, that this is our moment to see Hal. I find that very poignant.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I mean it when I say the very concept of it gives me chills. And it's this is something I love to be able to say in a comic. It's earned, right? And so this is Geoff Johns did not write the stories that we have read so far on this channel, but he's a walking encyclopedia. He knows what makes these characters tick, and he uses them in creative and exciting ways that make us really feel what these characters are capable of at their core. And it's a natural birthing of the Hal Jordan character into this story. And look, he loves his Green Lantern. He's gonna find a way to get his Green Lantern in there. This that means something to me to bring in
Right.
Hal.
Yeah. And the other thing that was it was a fun part of the story, but it wasn't necessarily the most significant part of the story, but it was the obtaining of the Spear of Destiny. I
Hmm.
think that the best part about hunting down the Spear of Destiny was just for Captain Marvel to get all those great lines out because he did have some excellent lines in those scenes. I love
Hmm.
that character. I mean, he's a character that not that many people talk about these days, even though he has sort of been in the spotlight for the last couple of years thanks to some of the films. I mean, the first Shazam film is such a fun ride. I really enjoy that
Phenomenal.
movie. Love that
Phenomenal.
movie. And
I
Zachary
I don't know if
Levi
I've said it on
was
this
the perfect person
channel.
to play him.
Oh, perfect. I don't know if I've said it on this channel, but let me just take the natural
Never
opportunity to
have.
say so. Shazam Shazam is just one of my absolute favorite comic book movies of all time. All time. It's one of the only movies I've ever seen in the theater where I applauded during the credits. I am not one to
Never knew
applaud
that.
for I am not one to applaud when there's no cast to receive my applause, but oh boy, Shazam. Ooh.
Never knew you liked that movie so much, man. We got to talk
Oh
about that
God.
some other
Well, that's why
time.
I'm glad I took the chance to say it. Per Perfect film.
I'm glad you
No
like it.
notes.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it. It's a great film. It really is. That's what I'm saying. It's like you may I know that your thoughts on the Zack Snyder Justice League are much to be desired in my eyes, but it's just like when you take a look at that movie, you take a look at Aquaman, you take a look at Wonder Woman, those movies are just great. They really
Hmm.
are very entertaining films.
Oh
And they
yeah.
got great cast to go with them. But
Hmm.
anyway, so Hal gets the opportunity to go back up to Earth to fight alongside the heroes. And I'm going to say something that I never thought that I would say in a million years. This is probably the very first time, especially now that I'm revisiting this story, that I absolutely hate Batman in this story. Like, I literally wanted to slap this guy
Hmm.
because he is just so adamant in this moment, living in the now, knowing about all the recent things that Hal did as Parallax, and he keeps saying, no, he cannot be the person to help us on this mission because of what he did. I'm like, dude, shut up.
Hmm.
You know, I know Batman's like the most beloved DC character, maybe the greatest, maybe the most beloved comic book character of all time. But my God, I wanted to slap him in the face in this story.
That's very much the Final Night characterization of
It's
Batman
worse in
too.
this. I think I
It's
think
worse in
Geoff
this.
Johns, with his love for Batman, just took what he read in Final Night and turned it up to 11 in this
I
book.
think that's what it is because you can see the line through how Batman is written directly from Final Night. It's a choice that is not going to remain the case for everything else we're going to read, but they really kind of took him as it's interesting. He's like a sort of like 90s ass moral compass.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is he's got that kind of like surly grimdark to him in the do what's right with an attitude kind of thing that very much reads like 90s comics to me. Um, so yeah, frankly, I understand exactly what you're saying. I think the pass that I give to Batman character is you want you it raises the stakes for Hal to have someone that is so beloved by the fandom be so adamantly anti-Hal. And I think that it just elevates what it is that Hal is trying to get through and be redeemed for. Because
Mm-hmm.
without that, it could feel like a very, the thing I never like to say about comics, unearned moment of let's just reset, right? So the more pressure that Batman puts on the idea of redemption of Hal, the more contrastingly earned that redemption can eventually somehow be, whether it's now or in 2009. But like it's I get the frustration with Batman though, because it is frustrating and it's leveraging a version of Batman that he didn't initially write. But I think he's using it decently well because you're feeling something when you read that. You just don't like it, but you're getting a reaction.
We talked about them a little bit, but we really didn't get into their story. Let's talk a little bit about the Sentinels of Magic
Sure.
because we mentioned them a lot, but we didn't mention all of the fun that we actually get with them. I mean, there's a couple of other characters here that really get some moments of shine, like Deadman. You know, that's a
Hmm.
character that I also know that Bruce Timm loves to play with when he finally got the ability to do so. I love Deadman in this book because of all the bodies that he invaded. And it's just like
Hmm.
when you see a character that's not acting 100%, it's like, oh, don't worry, it's just me. I'm in here because I
Hmm.
know you need this guy. He doesn't want to budge. So I'm just going to invade his body so he will join you on your trip to hell. You know, I kind of love that about him because that's the thing I love about Deadman. He is this soul that simply just wants to continue to live life, and he does
Hmm.
that by using people's bodies, not knowing that he's doing it, but he's using them for the purposes of being able to continue to live life, and I love that about him.
Hmm. Hmm. No, it's a fun character, and in the vein of as we go back and talk about some of these magic characters that we missed, the kind of stories that I don't read as much of. It is, but it's neat to see. It's also really fun to see them coexisting in the world with characters who I do read a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, I will definitely say that if you want to see a couple of these magical characters, probably one of the easiest ways to do so, rather than digging through comics, is to take a look at some of what Tim has done over the years. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film Justice League Dark. That's a great movie that features some of these characters like Zatanna and Constantine and Deadman, just to name a few, the Demon as well. But then, of course, there's also some of those DC showcase shorts. Those exactly what it is. It's like characters that really can't carry on like a 30-minute episode or a 90-minute movie. So let's just make a quick short about them. So definitely check out the one about the Spectre. Check out the one about the Phantom Stranger. You'll definitely see some very cool things, especially when it comes to the world of DC Magic. And also, a character that I really don't know what happens to after this story, but I know the character Felix Faust. I know he's a dark wizard. He's a villain, but I didn't know much about his son Faust. So the fact that he plays a significant role, and the fact that he's a very important person to go into hell and purgatory, because he tells his backstory about the fact that his father sold his soul to this demon, and one of the things that the DC characters need to do to get out of hell is to defeat this demon. So that's a pretty interesting thing to do, and it includes a sacrifice, and the sacrifice is definitely one of the fun twists in the book.
Yeah, and that we need, well, what is it? We need a moment of pure evil. That's the idea
Pretty
behind it?
much.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I don't know what I have to say about this.
Well, I
This,
love the
I'll be
fact that it was
honest. If you
I love the fact that they needed Enchantress. She didn't want to fight the battle. Deadman invaded her body so she could come in there with them, and in the end, she just gets her throat slashed.
And a little different from our Enchantress moment at the beginning of,
Yeah.
of the book.
Not to mention the fact that through all of this, the help that gets them out of hell is also the reincarnation of a character called the Blue Devil.
Hmm. Yeah,
Lots of
I
fun.
don't have too
Lots of
much on
fun.
this one. I got to be honest.
Yeah, the Blue Devil really doesn't have much of a backstory. He doesn't really have much of a character here. We just know that because he's there, he's going to give them the competitive edge they need to defeat this demon and get back up to Earth.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. No, this is key example of, when I led into this by talking about the classic adventure. There's a little bit of hijinks there in funny moment, but this is this is one of our legs of what needs to be done to complete the journeys of our three teams. And I really mean it. Sometimes I just got to say, yeah, that was fun.
Yep. And so it starts to get very deep when all of the tasks are officially together to defeat the possessed Spirit of Vengeance. And they manage to push Asmodel out. And the funny part is, they're still trying to figure out why it was Etrigan that made this all happen. But the way that it happens is everybody puts their faith in Hal Jordan, and Hal basically says, I'm finally going to be able to do what got me here in the first place. The first thing that he does to help defeat the Spirit of Vengeance is he calls on the spirits of his fallen Green Lantern Corps.
Mm-hmm.
None of them are happy to see him. I mean, of course, Kilowog gets a line in, which makes me happy, but they're still going to do what they got to do because they're the fucking Green Lantern Corps. Mm-hmm. They're going to fight for justice. Mm-hmm. And it's a great battle. It really is. And then when the Spirit of Vengeance is free, he wants to have another soul take over. And at one point in time, they find out that there's somebody possessing Superman. And it looks like Neron came up to Earth as well, and he gets pushed out. And then the Spirit of Vengeance basically says, I need a soul. and who wants to volunteer. And Hal is the one that volunteers, and the Spirit of Vengeance says, what justice and what vengeance do you seek? And he realizes, I'm not the one seeking vengeance. There are many that are seeking vengeance on me. If anything, I deserve to be punished for all my work. And that is when the Spirit of Vengeance says, you, Hal Jordan, you shall become the Spectre because you are selfless. And because you are selfless, you will bring justice to those who have none. And Hal Jordan becomes the Spectre.
And to be an intentional broken record earned, it leverages all of the horrible things we have seen Hal do over the last several years of comics that we have kind of in our abridged take gone through. Does it find his redemption in this moment? No. I mean, look, the man has died to find his redemption and still can't quite find it fully in our eyes. But this moment, it's the it's it's a beautiful concept that the one who wants to use the power for it's deeper than selfless reasons because other people would use the power for selfless reasons, but it's wants to use it for everything except kind of its vengeful purpose. It wants to find the meaning behind vengeance, right? And I think that's the thing that makes Hal such a natural fit into this role in this moment. And it's a great evolution of a way to turn over a new leaf and explore the character in a different way for the next leg to come, without having it feel cheap or like a just rewrite, right? Where this is a change that leverages the last several years of the character to fuel the change. It's perfect.
And not to mention the fact that it's nice to finally see Batman come around and
Yeah.
realize, yeah, he does deserve to be here. He does deserve to help us, etc. And it's just nice to know the thing I love the most about this story is that you really do get a nice ending, because the best part about Geoff Johns' writing is he leaves no stone unturned. Jonathan Hickman does the same thing, except he can be a little bit more long-winded. Everything that Geoff Johns adds into his story is crucial. You have to pay attention, because you get that satisfying ending where you see Etrigan, and his whole plan was to simply get Asmodel and Neron out in the open just so they could be imprisoned in heaven where they belong. And Etrigan gets the job done. And
That's the
that is
whole
just like, wow, there really was a plan in place this entire time. And my God, that is fantastic.
it's really funny because
I know.
there are moments where you could get swept up in the story and kind of if you ever stopped and went, why? You might feel like a little adrift at any point, but at the end it's like it's the machinations of this one lesser importance demon.
And it's just all, and also it's in the writing itself. Geoff
Oh yeah.
Johns, in the middle of the story, reminds you that the demon started this, and you have the heroes questioning, why did he do this? I thought he was one of us. I thought he was a friend of ours. So clearly there's a plan there, but we won't know what that plan is. But the fact that he is minding the reader, because the readers probably got that question in the back of their head, or just needs a reminder that this actually happened. So I'm still not going to tell you what it is, Geoff Johns says to the reader, but trust me, when you find out the true purpose, you'll be very satisfied with what you get.
Is him saying, I didn't forget either. I know you're reading this adventure right now, but I do remember how I started it.
Yeah. So when I take a look at this story at the end, To me, it really feels that Hal finally finds somewhat of his peace that he has been looking for, because the other thing that truly puts him at peace is he helps rebuild New York City after this
Mm-hmm.
entire battle. And so he fulfills a goal that sent him to where he was, and that was to rebuild a city that was lost, to rebuild a city that was crumbling. And he rebuilds New York City with his powers, and he feels happy. He feels
Mm-hmm.
happy because he actually fulfilled his goal to a degree, just in a different way.
And this is the beginning of a whole new journey for Hal. Also, is really the way that I want to frame what it is. Beyond by taking on this mantle as one to find redemption, it's not a total clean slate in the moment. It's it's the embracing of a journey that we will now go on of a yet again changed and truly changed Hal Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so looking back on this story, that's mainly what I take from it, right? Everything about Hal and his new role in this mantle of the Spectre. We've seen him shift mantles multiple times already, but like watching his journey is so exciting. And look, in the process of experiencing that and putting things in future stories we're going to read in context, we also got to read of a fun adventure comic.
Yeah.
So, I've got no complaints about what that experience is. We've got this impactful universe changing through line that we will leverage and look back on for other comics we will read, and we've got an entertaining self-contained story.
Yeah. And the last thing that I want to mention before we wrap this up, and I'm glad because I really thought I was going to forget this, so I'm glad I'm talking about it, is I'm so glad that we read this story now, because I literally just found
Oh,
out
yep.
about what's actually happening in Green Lantern, the present run, written by Jeremy Adams. Andy, I know that I mentioned this to you, but we never really have a real time conversation. Jeremy Adams is doing wonders with Green Lantern, and not just Green Lantern, he's doing wonders over at DC Comics. So much, in fact, that DC just had him sign a major contract with them to do some work with them. I just hope that they don't stretch him out too thin.
Mhm.
But he is like, at least to me and to many others, he may be the second coming of Geoff Johns over at DC Comics, because this is also a man that loves what he does, and he loves the characters that he's given. So much, in fact, that he is digging so deep, and he's dug deep to this very story, because in May, Green Lantern number 23 is going to have Hal encounter the Spectre on his current mission, and the Spectre is going to offer him his old job back. So the question is going to be, what is Hal going to do? Is Hal going to have to fight to say no? Is he going to want to take it? But I just love the fact that now that Day of Judgment is fresh in my mind, I'm just so excited to read Green Lantern 23, because I love the fact that Jeremy Adams is honing in on a true overlooked piece of the Green Lantern lore.
No, it's the perfect moment to find yourself in at this at this point in time with the full story. Definitely a coincidence, but a welcome one.
Very much a coincidence. I want to definitely say thank you for mentioning that. That is, it's just perfect timing and completely unexpected. But when I read that this was coming, I was like, oh my God, I just read Day of Judgment. This is
Just read
incredibly cool. So
it.
that's going to wrap it up another episode of Ultimate Journey, The Road to Blackest Night. Andy and I will be back very soon, going back to The Road to Secret Wars with a new chapter in the Ultimate Universe. And I'm really looking forward to the next couple of chapters, the next two chapters, I believe, on the road to Blackest Night, because we're going to go back to Kyle's story, because Kyle is still very much an important part of this journey as well. And it was because of Hal Jordan that Kyle Rayner was given to us, but it's also because of Kyle Rayner that Hal will get to the next big chapter of his journey. And we'll see that in the next 2 chapters of The Road to Blackest Night. But Andy, I want to thank you very much for joining me again. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please leave a comment and let us know what you thought. If you've never read Judgment Day before, I really hope you take the opportunity to read this, because it really is a fun story, especially if you're someone who does enjoy the work of Geoff Johns. Subscribe, hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content, and we'll see you in the next one.